Jonathan, good morning. How's it going?
Morning, Jake. Doing good, buddy. How about yourself?
Man, I'm doing great. After talking to Jamie about the Sam Iupa buck, it's like, man, we gotta, there's some really diehard antler collectors out there, and they probably are some of the best whitetail historians in reality, more than the a lot of people, And so
Right.
you came to mind. I know Cameron's talked to you in the past, and he said you gotta reach out to Jonathan and see if you do one, and we did, and I appreciate you carving out some time here today. So you're sitting for anyone that's not watching the video version of this, you have an awesome setup right now of just some of the most iconic, crazy whitetails. And you're an avid whitetail hunter and collector. But I'll let you introduce yourself, and then I got a pile of questions for you.
Awesome. Well, Jake, I can't thank you enough for having me on today. So this is just a normal day here. But uh, my name's Jonathon York. I'm originally from Wilmington, Ohio, and moved down into this area uh, in 1992. And I live in Adams County now. So this is where I call home. So we live kind of live right there where the river bottoms and the farming plateau comes together in Adams County. So
Mhm.
it's just a prime whitetail territory. I mean, there's good sheds, good deer harvested every year. So, but I
Yeah,
grew up in the country farming. I'm just a country kid that likes antler, I guess. So,
yeah, for sure. Well, one of the one of the questions I had was you mentioned kind of where you're at in Adams County and how the river bottoms and the farm meet, and I think that is such a, my opinion, common theme of where some incredible whitetails come, throughout this entire country. Like just circling back to where we're almost confident where the Sam Iupa buck was shot. It's almost a very similar description to what you just described.
right.
Have you noticed any themes of where some of these most iconic whitetails where the antlers were picked up or where the deer were shot? Or is it literally throw a dart across the country and that could be a location where a world class whitetail can grow?
Well, I mean, I've noticed a pattern here in Adams County. I mean, obviously some of these other states, you kind of got to go back to the record book and look, but you can see a pattern in some of it. Uh, here in Adams County, it seems like there's pockets. It's not so much that there's a bunch of monsters out there, but it seems like every now and again, in the state of Ohio, you'll have a county that's got a pocket of monsters in it. You got Sean Clark buck. It was shot you know 10 minutes from the house here. So I mean that buck was like 260, and I mean that was just that's a monster. And then a couple other ones. I mean that have been shot here in the county. You got the Amish buck, the Schmucker Jonathan Schmucker buck. It seems like it goes a few years and then bam, you got one. But you kind of got some of them early era bucks. It seems like the 90s, 2000s, it's like a different era, and you got the 40s, 50s, 60s, maybe even the 70s, is kind of their own thing. But there is somewhat of a pattern, just on how they're shot. I mean, look at the Steven Tucker buck, and then you got the Luke Brewster buck that just popped up that next year. So I mean, it seems like it's just pockets, here and there. So that's about the best way I can describe it, for Adams County. It's just maybe a pocket here or there, uh, not exactly every year, but a couple years in between, on a span.
Yeah. And when you say pockets, I mean, what in your mind, knowing like where some of these high end deer have came from, describe what a pocket may look like in your mind. Like
Uh,
what are some
well,
terrain
well,
features? Is it a mix of ag? Is it? I mean, what does that look like?
I think there can be a mix of ag. I think that's a good thing to have. That's obviously 50-50 would be perfect. You got your timber, you got your ag, the crops, but you got the bucks like the Lear McCoy buck. Uh, he was just a straight timber ghost, man, and he was in briars and valleys, and he kind of come from the eastern part of Adams County. So it was one of them things where like he was traveling for food somewhere. There was some ag fields, in a distance, but where he lived, I mean, it was just nasty, thick hollers and big timber. So I mean, uh, that's a league of its own right there. Once you start getting back up in the hills,
Mhm.
but perfect scenario for me, pocket, mixture of ag, timber, decent water channel going through, whether it's a creek or down there at the river or something like that. But if you definitely got to have a mixture, I think that helps. Uh, but if you can find something that's kind of secluded, something that doesn't butt up against the main highway, or kind of a well-traveled area, they'll show up. I mean, and it doesn't take. Sometimes it may take 4 years for that buck to develop. And I'm not preaching about management and all that stuff. I'm just saying, it takes 4 years, for a buck to actually start really coming into it. So no matter
Mhm.
where you're at.
Yeah. Yeah, it's you can't grow a 5-year-old deer in 1 year. That's just the
Right.
science of it. That's the science of it. So, how did you get bit by the antler collecting bug? Because it seems, from the outside looking in, it seems like once you get that bug, it's arguably a full-on addiction.
Uh, and you talked about Jamie. He calls me the hybrid. I like to collect the racks and the sheds. So
Mhm.
but I would say the bug um, happened a little bit earlier in life. I love shed hunting. I'd love to do that every day of my life if I could. But the thing is, as I start collecting sheds from the shed hunting, and that you start seeing other people's stuff that they found over the years and different things like that, you start looking at some of the caliber antler that somebody has found here or there or whatever, and you're like, man, that's a record shed. That's a nice thing. That's a nice shed right there. So the bug bit me. Um, I guess I would say just a little bit after high school. Um, I run across a guy that was closing up a local gun and ammo shop, and he had some deers that he was going to get rid of. And I thought, man, I hate to see this rack. I mean, these are some nice racks. I hate to see them just go to a dumpster or somewhere else. So I bought them, and I thought, well, this is pretty cool. I can take these home and remount them and hang them up, and they look good. So I kind of got bit by the bug then, and then as it progressed, as I kept shed hunting over the years, there was a few people, a few farmers I'd help out. Walked into a barn one day and like, here's a pile of antler, and I looked at him and said, "Are you not going to do nothing with this?" And he's like, "Nope." I said, "Well, I'll just buy the whole thing from you." He said, just take it, just take it." He's like, "I ain't doing nothing with it." He said, "I don't want them in my tires." So it 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 didn't progress overnight. It's one of those things that, like, when the bug got you, um, you still have the hopes and dreams. When you're shed hunting, you're walking around. That next buck, that next big shed is just around the corner. I mean, that's what keeps us all going.
Mhm.
So it's kind of that way in the collecting. You start making contacts with people, and you kind of see what they have, and then that's where the bug gets you. They you walk in and you see this antler that they got, and you're like, you can tell right away. Oh man, that's a good rack or a good shed. That's kind of how it goes. I mean, it's kind of the same feeling, one way or the other. But I'd say the bug bit me not too long after high school. I'd say.
Yeah, that it is interesting. There's yeah, I can see the hunt for the next piece in your collection has to be a fun journey to go down, and it's like you have different leads or you hear about something, and then uh, is that kind of how that works? Like, is it just word of mouth, or is it? Because I mean, all of it is. There's only so many of these really iconic whitetails, right?
There's a couple, like I said, it kind of goes back to the pocket thing, but there's some iconic whitetails that are around here, and I'm going back to the Schmucker buck. It It's one of those things where I was surveying at the time. There was like 9 years of surveying that I'd done with the company, and you hear about them. You're out in the field working. Of course, word spreads through the county, and you're like, oh man, you heard about this buck or you heard about that buck. So as I'm surveying, people talk. You hear about things. So once you hear about this or that, you kind of dig into it, on the collecting side of things. and you try to get the whereabouts, the history from it, maybe some trail cam photos and stuff like that. So it goes back to where you're doing your research too. You got to do your research on them, and kind of look and see what it is, what the area is. Um, but as far as trying to track down another piece, a lot of times it's word of mouth. I mean, that's about the best way to uh, kind of go at it. I mean, yeah, there are some things that I dig in the record book and look at, and some nights I'm just looking in the record book. I didn't watch the TV or doing anything else. I'm just looking through the record book. But it's you're looking, you're always searching, and so it's most of the time I would say word of mouth is probably the best, and that's local. Uh, I'm not saying that's through every state. I mean, obviously I don't live in Illinois where you're at, so I mean I don't know exactly what's going on there. So I'd say word of mouth is probably the best.
How many diehard antler collectors do you think there are in the United States? Like diehard. So how many Jonathan Yorks are out there?
Oh, uh, I don't know. There's as I got into it more, I think there's a lot more than what you think. There's a lot of them that are just very quiet. They don't want to post nothing. They don't advertise nothing. They don't say a whole lot about it. Like what they do or how they collect. So and there's nothing wrong with that. That's perfect. I mean that's good. I mean that's how you kind of move through some of the stuff. But as far as how many, man, I couldn't put a number on it. I mean, you got Matt Beard and Mikey C out there. You got Shane and Glenn, a few of them there with the North American Shed Hunters Club. Those are kind of the top ones there. But you've got some. I'm not going to name no names, but there's a friend out west. He does nothing but collect muley, and and I'm not putting Keith Snyder's collection down by any means, but it blew me away just the caliber of muleys that he had that would probably outnumber what Keith has in his. And Keith has an awesome collection. Don't get me wrong, but I had no idea. And once he sent me a couple pictures, I thought, man, I've got to go see this in person. So there's always people that are behind the scenes or behind the doors that you just don't know that collect. So
Yeah. Yeah, I can. So do you think there's less than 250 diehard antler collectors, or do you think that number's closer to 100?
I'd say in between.
Yeah.
I'd say in between there is. I wouldn't go so much as 250, but you got to take Canada in consideration too. I mean, there's some real good collectors that are there too, and there's, I mean, it's hard to tell how many's there, that you just don't know about. A lot of times you can kind of pick them out on Facebook. You can, we all love antler. That's, most outdoors do. The guys that are out there doing it, but you can kind of figure out pretty quick. Which ones are die hard and which ones are kind of mediocre, I guess.
Yeah. What so you're sitting there with a bunch of different antlers and racks. What's your personal favorite and why?
Well, my personal favorite, I don't know. There's a lot of favorites. I'll put it that way. Uh, a couple years ago, a few years ago, I got the opportunity um, just to meet with a friend, and he said something. He said, "Hey, man," he's like, "I got a nice rack. You want to, or a nice set of sheds?" He's like, "You want to come up and take a look at them?" So, I'd heard about them, hadn't thought nothing of them, and so I went over and took a look at them, and man, I was blown away. So I walked in and I picked them up, and I was like, "My gosh, they're just so heavy." And like the mass was good, the tine length was pretty good, but the beam length just blew me away. So I knew it was something, the minute I seen them. So I had to back off of them. I wanted to make an offer, but at that time, Jamie Martin had, already put an offer in, and I, out of pure mutual respect, I don't want to impose on anybody. So
Mhm.
I backed off, and I contacted Jamie. I said, "Hey, Jamie, I'd be interested in a set, but I want to make sure you're free and clear of it, or you may not be interested." He said, "Absolutely, go ahead." So that's this set right here in front of me. It's called the Marshall Mushroom Set, and it's got 32-inch beams.
Whoa.
Yeah,
Gee.
it's a dandy, and I mean as far as mass, I mean it's hard to beat. So it's got mass throughout, and it's only got 3 points in non-typical. So that's probably one of my favorite newer sets that's kind of come into the collection here in just the past couple of years. Like
So
I said, it's just been,
what's the story of that buck? So the guy you bought it from, did he find him? Did he buy him from someone else?
well, it's got a good story, and they kind of preserved themselves over the years. A young kid was mushroom hunting, and that's kind of where the name come up. But he was mushroom hunting. He wasn't even looking for sheds, and he run across this set as he was mushroom hunting. So he took him. He said something to his local barber there in Highland County, and so the barber bought him off of him. Kid's like, "Yeah, I ain't worried about it. I'd rather have the money than the sheds." So
Trade him for a haircut. I'm just kidding.
yeah, yeah. So that would have to be a heck of a haircut, right?
Right.
So he gives them to his barber or whatever, and they kind of stay in his possession. And my buddy that I got him off of walked in to get his haircut, and he's like, "Well, he's like, I'm gonna give you some money for him." And so I'm sure it was a little bit more amount than what the kid got for him. So he got him, and he kept him in his possession for a couple of years, and that's when he told me about him. I went up and looked, and I made him an offer he couldn't refuse, and he said, "Well, if I want it to go to anybody," he said, I want it to go to somebody that's going to keep him right here in Ohio, since they're Ohio sheds." So,
Mhm.
and Jeremy Bassford is the guy I got him off of. He's a good friend, and heck of a shed hunter. And he when he sold them to me, he said, he's like, "I want them to stay right here." And I said, "That's no problem at all." So it's just amazing. The kid, how it transpired. He went to his barber. He showed him. The barber bought him. Well, another guy walks back in. He gets his haircut, Jeremy. And he gets that set. And lo and behold, here they are. So, and who would have thought? So, but matter of fact, these weren't too far from where the Brian Stevens buck was killed there in Highland County. So,
Mm. Another
which is
pocket. Another pocket.
yeah, another pocket right there. So it's just that's probably my favorite set right now. So
And so is it, for once again, everyone's gonna have to watch the video version of this, but I mean that deer is a very clean, typical frame, the super, super long beams. What are those antlers score?
with the spread credit, they're right at 200. So I mean, and that you have to push a lot of bone, to hit that 200 number just as a
Yeah,
typical.
yeah,
And these have very little, as you can, I don't know if you can see, but there's
yeah.
just a
Little drop
small
time.
drop time, and then it's got a small flyer that comes off the G2 on his left side. On the right side, he's just got a split brow. It's a very small split brow, but his beam length, I mean, I think that's his main characteristic. It's probably his mass and his beam length.
Yeah, yeah. It's so crazy to see. Like we're all hunting whitetails, right? And then there's these genetic freaks of just you look at, okay, what's the probability of a deer could grow like that, and then what's the probability that deer doesn't die and is able to get to that age, and then what's the probability someone finds them or ends up shooting that deer. I mean, it's because I mean there's millions of deer in the country, but there's 1% of 1% of 1% that even get to something as amazing as that.
Right, and you hit the nail on the head. I mean, it's hard in the whitetail world. I mean, they that's their thing, man. They got to survive every day, and that's what they're fighting to do most. Uh, you gotta, I got to. This is my opinion, but you got, there's a farming community around here, and like last year, I hit two fawns like with the hay cutter. So that killed me. Like you never know what that could have been. Was that a set of bucks? Was it a buck doe? So you've always got that thing where their survival is it's rough. I mean, every day for them. You know, you got coyotes, you got bobcat around here, and there's no season on bobcat here. They're protected. So not only do we have cars, hay season, hunting, as that, as a full spectrum on that, then you've got, the predators that are, here too. So, I mean, genetic wise, I mean, if you can find that buck and he's got everything he needs, it can happen. I mean, he can just absolutely thrive. Uh, it's, I don't know, like I said, there's, as long as he's got the good habitat, he's got everything he needs. And it does play a little bit of genetic wise. If he's got some good genes, his pappy and his grandpappy had what he needed. That it can push a long way. So
Yeah, yeah, that's very true. Would you? So obviously you're really in tune with all the different iconic bucks, iconic sheds. What state do you give the crown to producing the most of those? Because we can just go to the Boone and Crockett book and see which one has the most Boone and Crockett bucks. But I'm talking, what state in your mind has over the years produced the best of the best over the span of history, and then maybe what's one in the last 20 years?
man, my mind always goes to Iowa. I mean, there's just uh there's kind of four states that I keep in mind, and I mean, there. Don't get me wrong. There's other states that whoppers come out of too, but um, you got Kansas, Iowa, Illinois is a great state for them. You got Ohio here, but Iowa seems to produce, and I mean they just do. It's a great state. I don't know if it's because of the crop portion of it, or if it's just the lay of the land, but it seems to me like they tend to produce every year. So there's states that produce every year. Ohio seems to be kicking in there a little bit.
Yeah,
Illinois always produces a good one. Kansas is I mean there's a buck that's still alive out there in Kansas right now that I held a shed off of, and I mean it's like, is this even from this planet? I mean it's monster. So I mean there's definitely states that produce every year,
is
and
that
then
a typical
there's
or non-typical frame for the Kansas deer?
it'd be more of a non-typical.
Okay,
So the mass and the flyer that come off this buck on that one side of the shed, I mean, it's absolutely insane. I got to see it at the Iowa Deer Classic. Matter of fact, this past year, got to hold it, and I don't know. It's just one of them sheds. You look at sheds, and then you're like, you're dumbfounded by it when you look at it. So, but the Iowa's probably top ranking, I would say. I mean,
yeah, that's not surprising. But then you look at this past year in Ohio, right? Like there was two big deer killed, uh,
right,
the Alexander buck and Jason Thomas's buck, and like
right.
both of those are really big deer.
They are, and CJ's buck, man. I mean, that's just to grow something that clean, and there's depending on what scoring club you are or whatever, there's some talk about that left side of his, but the right side, I mean, it's just perfect clean. I mean, you don't. I mean, it blew my mind when I first seen the pictures of it. So, but you got Ohio that seems to hold strong, and the two bucks that did come out of Ohio this year. I mean, that I mean they're mind blowing. And to grow something that clean, it takes a lot, like I said, to make something a clean typical. But um, if you're a non-typical fan, that's good too. I mean, but that adds up real quick, on the non-typical. But on the
Mhm.
typical side, man, I'm a clean typical fan. So I
Yeah,
mean, I
likewise.
like them all, but I'm a clean typical fan. So when those bucks showed up on the radar when they got harvested this year, that was those deer or something.
Do you know of anyone that has sheds of the Alexander buck from years previous?
Uh, I do. They believe that they believe that uh, this set is off of him from last year. So from the previous year. I'm yet to get to hold him or see him in person. I don't want to speculate too much on that or whatever, but that the whole court case and everything's still going on with that. So, but the thing is, uh, they look good. I've seen pictures. I've got pictures. So I mean, it's like it's a really good looking shed, uh, and found right there where that buck was roaming. So I mean, it's kind of a dead giveaway. So,
Yeah,
but like I said, I want to see him in person. I
sure.
always try to hold them and make sure, because deer will carry the same characteristics year to year. Whether it's something small or whether it's something big. That's real defined. You always want to make sure. So
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And so what I mean, there's a lot of different things I can think of here right now, but I guess let's talk about how'd you end up getting the Amish buck? Like what's because to me it's like it's fascinating just how these end up in a collector's hand. Like just
right,
the mushroom buck you just mentioned. Like kid found it with the barber, like that to me is it's a cool piece of the deer's history.
right. Well, like I said, I ended up, you knew about the buck. I surveyed some of the property for the company I worked for, GH Wallingford out of Peebles. And basically, you heard about the buck, uh, you read about it, you get to see pictures of it. It kind of goes away in your mind. Like you're like, man, that is a beautiful buck. That would be awesome to kill something like that. So that being in mind, it just kind of goes away after a while. You seasons go on, you kind of forget about that deer. And I'm not saying it's a deer you can forget about, but in your mind, you kind of lose track. And then all of a sudden, I get into the collecting scene, and it's one of those things where I totally lost track of that deer in my mind. And I thought, man, there's got to be sheds out there or something. Well, Mike Cherross has that out there with the shed club. He has the set the year before. So I see pictures of them, and I I get a hold of a guy, and I go to pick up a shed from him, and he says, man, I got something up here that you might like, and he said it's an Ohio piece. I said, okay. Never thought nothing about it. The deer was completely out of my mind, and he said, well, I'll send you a picture. So he sends me a picture. I stopped what I was doing immediately, and I just stared at the picture, and I was like, you got to be kidding. You got to be kidding me. So I knew it was the Amish buck right off the bat, and I knew that there's not many replicas of it.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I'm thinking in my mind like, man, we got to make this happen somehow. So this is one of the dream bucks, the county bucks. Matter of fact, one of the replicas is hanging in our courthouse mounted right here in West Union. So I I said, well, what do you got to have for that? Are you willing? If you're willing to get rid of it, what do you got to have for it? So we we sat down, kind of negotiated a little bit while we was up there. I got to see his collection, and before we left, we ended up giving the money for the buck. He wants to remain anonymous, so it's just one of them things. It's a friend that I've met over the years and become real close to. Uh, Super nice guy, big shed hunter, and he I'm very thankful that he let it go. 'Cause, I mean, a piece like that you just don't let go. It's one of them things where you get a 295 inch and 3/8 buck. That's a that's just not a buck you let go. Whether you're a collector or one that you harvest or found sheds off of, that's not an easy thing to let go. So that's kind of how it happened. It come out of the blue. Uh, you know, uh, it's an amazing thing. How they can come out of the blue like that, and it does. It happens in the collecting world of it, and it's almost like if you're out in the field shed hunting and you've got a buck that you've never seen before in your life, and then all of a sudden you walk up and you find a big set of sheds. It kind of happens the same way. But that's how I come to know about it was going and purchasing another shed and this popping up as well. So that
Hmm.
it kind of led right into it.
Yeah. And so when you saw that deer, you knew it, you're familiar with it. Is that like where you like, I have to have it. I don't care what the price is. Cause I mean that I so this and this is me being a little just like transparent with everything is people want how what
Absolutely.
is this stuff worth? Like cause it's also it's a very private situation, like you mentioned, like the guy wants to remain anonymous,
Right.
right? And then
Right.
you read an article about the restitution buck, for example, and they said the
Right.
value of that should be in excess of 20,000. And so it's all and then you hear the crazy stuff that Bass Pro paid a gazillion dollars for a deer, which we know is not true.
Right.
And so it's like
Right.
there's all these different things. It's like so we're like I have to have it at any cost, or is it like well based off of some comparable sales and what I know this deer sold for, I'm willing to offer X.
Right. It's one of those things where, and keep in mind that buck was just 10 minutes from the house here. That's where he
Uh-huh.
was harvested. So when I seen it, you kind of hit the nail on the head. That was one of the things where I was like, oh man, what's the price going to be? Because you got to have it. It's one of those deer that just absolutely sticks out in your mind. And you got an opportunity like that. You you don't do a whole lot of negotiation. You just got to get it.
Yeah,
So
uh-huh.
I will tell you what I paid for it, but I paid $2,500 uh, for it, and I mean that's a chunk of change, in some people's eyes, but in
2,500.
yeah, I mean that's a chunk of change in somebody's eyes, but in one aspect, it can grow in value. So
Hmm.
especially in the collecting thing, and you get that, and it's one of those things where I don't think I'll let it go. It's one of those that is going to stay, and I can admire it. And as you can tell, my taxidermist is way behind. So,
Yeah.
like, it's the time of the year where taxidermists won't take no more in, and like I'm waiting on taxidermy work to be done. So, and I
Mhm.
apologize for that.
No, no
So,
need to apologize.
but it's uh, it's one of those things where you seen it, you know what it was, you know the history behind it. I mean, it was almost like, no, I didn't kill the deer. It's not
Sure.
my deer. I didn't harvest it or whatever. But the joy and the excitement that it brought that hunter, you can kind of admire that, and you can really respect that when you look at it on a wall, whether you're a collector or the actual person yourself, that's harvested it.
Hmm. Yeah. Is there so obviously you have a replica of the Brian Andrews buck, right? And
Yeah.
and so I'm excited. We're scheduled to talk with Brian here soon. And the question I'm getting at is there a code of ethics or like, it's like because let's say I found a ginormous shed, right? You have
Right.
and I can say I found it behind my house, but maybe it was found somewhere else, or maybe it was acquired in unethical ways. Is there
Right.
because that has to happen, right? So is there like a
Right.
like man? I think you're that's a hot antler, right, or something like that. Like,
Right.
is that a thing?
Yeah. You can you kind of pick up on that. I mean, that there's obviously a lingo, and through everything. But if somebody's real adamant about selling something right now, like, yeah, how much money you give me for it? Like, what about today? Cash, whatever. Like, if they're coming to you right now, like, you kind of back off. You don't want to step in somewhere where you probably shouldn't. Because I mean, say you buy that antler from this individual, and 3 days later the game warden's at your door saying, well, we got trail cam pictures where he was trespassing and he got that shed.
Hmm.
So then your whole collection's at jeopardy.
Oh wow,
That you
yeah.
don't want a game warden showing up at your door and saying, we're going to take a look around. But, I mean, that's not a good feeling, no matter what aspect or spectrum you're on. That's not a good feeling. So,
Hmm.
but yeah, that's one of the things you kind of got to watch for. I myself, I pray about a lot of stuff, and if it's something that sticks out, there's something wrong. There's a kind of a little bit of a red flag that goes up. I'll back off. See what transpires. Time. A lot of times, you give it a little bit of time, it'll tell the truth. So,
Hmm.
but that's kind of how I work with that. But that's something that you can keep in your mind on things. So,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, I can imagine.
here's that shed there that
Golly,
it's 130 inches is what it goes, and that's his
that's
left side.
that's unreal. Do you and I'm gonna ask Brian this, but do you think that's in someone's private collection right now, or do you think it changed hands multiple times after it was stolen? Or I mean, and this is just your opinion. Like, obviously, you're so
Yeah,
far removed
yeah,
from it.
this is like I said, my heart kind of goes out to Brian, especially on it because I mean I know how I would feel
It's
if
irreplaceable.
somebody,
Yeah,
yeah, I mean it is, and whether it's from fire or theft or anything like that. I mean that would create a void, So
mhm,
in my opinion, um, I think there's a lot of racks out there that are there, but they haven't surfaced yet. Samiopa. I mean, that was a tremendous deer. I mean, look how dormant it laid.
yeah,
Not that there was some wrongdoing. There wasn't no
yeah.
wrongdoing, but look how long it laid dormant. Um, but and big congrats to Jamie on that one. That was wow. But
I got to see that deer in person. He was we crossed paths maybe a weekend or two ago, and I got to hold that deer in person. And I know it was out at the
yeah,
Iowa show, and I was there, and I didn't stop at the North American Whitetail booth, but to see that deer in person and hold it is something you can't even describe.
it is. I got to hold it. I know we're kind of going off course
Yeah,
here, but I got to hold it, and I couldn't say nothing about it. Me and Amanda actually met Jamie like 3 days before as he was traveling to Iowa for the classic, and he said, "Keep your mouth quiet." He said, "But check this out." He's like, "No pictures." He's like, "No nothing." So I got to hold it, and I looked at Amanda and I was like, "You don't know how many dreams are coming true right now." And then he's like, "Well, I got something else for you." So he pulled the Brian Stevens buck out, and I got to hold it for the first time ever in my life. So he kind of played a little hat trick there on me. He's like, "Oh yeah, well here's this. Look at this." I was like, "Man, yeah, I can't describe how grateful I was." And I mean, Jamie is he's a top notch guy. And for him to allow people and even the public to hold that
yeah,
buck, that's crazy. But
yeah,
back to the Brian Andrews though. Like I said, I think there's a lot of racks that are out there, whether they've been mishandled or whatever. Whatever the scenario is, I think there's quite a few out there that are there. Nobody knows where they're at. I'm sure a few people do. Um, how many bucks are post year throughout the whole United States, you
yeah,
know, and nobody knows about them. And so whether it's from wrongdoing or whatever, I think there's a lot of them out there, and they may surface and they may not. Uh, there's I don't know how Illinois is or whatever, but Ohio, if it's a confiscated deer, I mean they dig a hole and they put them through a wood chipper. So I mean that's the, to find a rack that is quality and legit. I mean that's rough. So I mean that's why we're kind of going for the racks too. But I think there's a lot out there to answer your question. I think there is, and they're just laying dormant. And like Brian, man, I really hope they do find it. I really
yeah.
do. That would be an amazing, amazing thing, for him to have that back. And I'd love to see it. I mean, I'd be overjoyed just to see that happen.
Yeah, I feel like just some sort of closure for him, and most importantly him, but the whitetail community. And
Right.
when you get to thinking that, it's like, you know, you would typically in that scenario, it's probably someone you know. But knowing how crazy that deer is, it could have been anyone.
Right. Yeah. I hate to say it, there's a lot of jealousy in the world. And, it's, I mean, that's got to be what it's from. I mean, what would possess somebody to go and steal a rack like that, you know, out of somebody's house, out of a young kid? I mean, Brian was young,
Yeah, I
when
think he's
he
16 when he
shot
shot
that.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's a kid. So why would you steal something like that from a kid? that it brought him so much excitement and joy. I mean, why would you do that? So I mean, that's I'm not going to speculate on like give my opinion on who it was or whatever, but I mean, it would have to be somebody that's knowledgeable or know where that deer's at.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Well, and it is crazy. And you look at, I was recording with Gordon Whittington earlier this year, and I asked him, "Do you think that the world record typical is in a basement or something?" And it wasn't 2 weeks later that the San Mayupa buck came out. It's like, well, technically that would have been the world record for a while. But I'll ask you the same question. Do you think that somewhere, quite literally in a basement or in a lodge in Canada or somewhere, that the world record typical has been shot legally, ethically, and no one knows about it?
It's a good possibility with this day and age. I mean, that like I said, Sam Iopa buck's a perfect example of it. As far as it could be, but it seems like if it was that older, kind of an older generation that was hunting, and they just maybe didn't care too much about getting a scored or whatever, they just kind of let it be, let it sit there. I mean, that could happen. I mean, back to the Stephen Tucker or the Brewster buck. I mean, what they was back to back.
Yeah.
So to say that the legal perfectly harvested deer and it's a world record is out there, I mean, it could happen. Uh, Typical wise, I think that's going to be a hard feat though. That's typical does not happen every day.
Yeah.
So there's a lot more non-typical than there is typical. So I would say it's probably going to be harder on the typical end of things to pull that off.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. I asked Jamie this question. I'll ask you the same one. I'm going to give you a blank check, and you can buy whatever deer or rack or any shed or any set of sheds or any rack ever known to man. What is it, and what are you writing on the check?
Man, it definitely depends on what deer it is. Uh,
Well, you get a pick.
well, I actually sat down. Me and Amanda sat down at Amanda Neal is my girlfriend, by the way.
Mhm.
She We sat down at dinner um, in Iowa with Jamie and a few others there at the table. Tommy, Bubba, and Ron, and we got to talking about racks, and I kind of picked his brain. I told him, I said, I love that Brian Stevens buck. That's the basically, if it was a shed, it would be the number one 4 point in the world.
Mhm.
But that deer holds so many records, and that is a unbelievable buck. So I said, Jamie, I said, I'd like to know a figure, on what you would sell that for. And he politely come out and he said, well, I'm not ready to sell it right now, but he told me a figure of what it would be. So if I had to go buy uh, any buck in the world, record buck, just on the collecting aspect of it, I'd say you're looking at six figures.
Yeah.
So
It's
on
crazy.
a lot of them. So
Yeah.
you're looking at a six figure and above. Uh, and Amanda, I think she had to stop eating there for a minute because she's like, "You what?" So she said, "You're kidding me." She's like, "Antler is worth that much?" I was like, "Well, depends on who it is," but I
Yeah.
said, "It is what it is." So and so I mean, you're looking at six figures on a lot of stuff. I mean, the general, uh, the Brian Stevens buck, Illinois roadkill is one of my favorites too. So I mean,
Mhm.
that's a that's a buck that I'd love to have, in the collection or whatever. But to answer your question, I mean, I don't know. At that point in time, like if you had the money, a blank check, I mean, where would it end?
Yeah.
So I mean, it's almost. I hate to say it. It's almost. I don't want to compare antler to a Harley, but they grow in value
Sure.
as more years progress. So especially certain ones.
Yeah. And so what would be some things that make it more valuable? Is it a record that remains strong, or is it because like the story, it seems like if you put a 200-inch typical with almost no real interesting story, and then you put a 200-inch typical with a really interesting story, the one with the interesting story I think would be worth more. That's just I don't know. You know way more about this, but I'm just thinking out loud.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if it's a well known, I mean, obviously, if the deer's got a little bit of fame, a little bit of more story and history behind it, it seems like it does go up in value. But you're also looking at hidden gems, like the ones that nobody really knows about, and they still score that same amount as the other set. They just don't have a real flashy, history or story behind them. But the thing is you got so many antler out there, and you kind of want them all, but in the same way, there's so many that you know you can go on to the next, on certain ones. But it's good to have a history with them. It's good to have that story. I mean, that's probably half of it with me. I want to hear that story. I want to see where they come from. I want to know, the county. What was they laying in? Was they laying in the field? Was they laying in the timber? Where was they? So I mean, yeah, story definitely. I think it definitely ups their value a little bit, especially if they're, I would say, fame, but they're, people's knowledge of them, kind of pushes that too.
Mhm. Let me ask you this. I don't know. Do you know anything about? I remember this was like right when I would say trail cams were hitting mass market, and there was a buck called the Ohio OG.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
whatever happened to that deer? What did anyone ever find the sheds? What's the story?
Uh, that I don't know. I don't know the ever ending of that. I really don't, and that's something that I'd love to dig into. I know Matt has some sheds off of it, Matt Beard, in his collection, and there's been some replicas made of it. But man, that buck was just magnificent. I mean, that was a deer that, Lord, you would hate to harvest it because you'd have to see what he was. You wanted to see what he wanted to grow next year, the following year. But I never did hear, uh, Jake, what happened to that deer, and I apologize. I wish I did,
No,
but
I think that's part of the mystery. Yeah.
yeah, I think that's part of it. Uh, I owned a shed. Do you remember the Ohio ribcage buck?
Yes.
Do you ever remember hearing
Yeah.
about that?
Yeah.
I owned that left side for a while, and that deer. There was a story behind it. The landowner couldn't agree to it. He wanted the buck. After it was harvested, and the hunter, didn't have written permission. You hear this back and forth, whatever. So the deer ended up getting taken or confiscated. I would have liked to have had that shed and that rack, pictured side by side. And I just never did do that. I couldn't track the rack down. I don't know where it went. So, and that was one of the sheds that I ended up getting rid of though. So there's a mystery there on some of the deer. It's like a cold case, if you
Yeah.
would, on some of them. So
Yeah, it's the unsolved mysteries, unsolved mysteries of
yeah,
the whitetail world. That's what it
you'll
is.
have to you'll have to put that music to it. The
Yeah,
unsolved mystery music.
yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, and so is there any? You have a bunch of antlers there, and I mean, is there anything else you want to share that really stick out to you, or any pieces of whitetail history that have you really excited?
Well, I actually acquired the Holden Hornbuck not too long ago, and it was obviously from the 1940s, around that era, and here in Ohio. But it was one that everybody's seen, everybody's heard about. It's such an old era buck. So I actually was able to acquire that, and that was one I got really excited about. And it is the funkiest looking thing you've ever seen in your life. And it's almost like once you hold it, it's almost like the rack it needs to be turned upside down,
Yeah, I
to
can
be
see that.
mounted.
Yeah,
And but man, the drop tines and like the hole in it and one of the drop tines, it's just I mean it's the number two typical worldwide. So, but it's just it's a crazy deer. I was pretty excited about that. And then you can see the triple drop tine of Sam Willett. That's been one of my favorites. I acquired that from Chad Reynolds, good friend out in Indiana. He uh, he offered it to me, and I made a little trip out there to get it. And when I got there, I was just blown away. I mean, it's a symmetrical wise,
Yeah.
you can't get it better on a non-typical frame, But I mean, it's a good frame. The big drop tines, and it's got two other drop tines that come off below that beam, so they're characterized as the drop tines. So, but um, those two have got me real excited. I think it probably pushed the collecting bug, the bite from that bug,
Yeah.
a little bit more. But you also got to be humble and modest, and you know, you can't just go full throttle on some things, So you gotta pull that throttle back a little bit, on the collecting side
Yeah.
sometimes,
It,
and
it takes
use it
time.
wisely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think caused
Uh,
the hole in the hole in the horn?
I mean, I don't know. It's to say, if you look at it, I mean, it's straight through. So it's almost the size of a 22. And I
Hmm.
mean, so if you look at it, you're like, well, did it get shot? But I mean, at the angle that it gets shot, it would hit the deer. It would have hit that deer. So, and they found it dead. Is that what killed it, or did it get hit by that train, or whatever? So, or whatever the scenario was where they found it. But it's almost 22 size. I'm not saying that's what it was, but
Hmm.
I mean, it is all the way through, and it is I mean, it looks exactly like a diameter of a 22. So, but I'm not saying that's what happened. So, but
And you always hear the old timers talking about rabbit hunting or hunting along railroad tracks too,
right,
right? And
right.
so, I mean, that kind of could line up to that.
Yeah, and that some of the story is, it was found, dead on the railroad, or they think it got hit by a train, and it was over in the side fence, or like a right of way fence or whatever. So and that easily could have been done. I mean, whatever the scenario, or whatever it is. I mean, there's a lot of scenarios that could have happened there. So
Yeah. What if you had a genie in a bottle and you could get a definitive answer for any of the unknown whitetail things, like what did kill the hole in the horn buck? Is the Rumpala buck legitimate? Like any of these things, what happened to the OG buck in Ohio? If you could get the definitive answer on anything, what keeps you up at night the most? Well, not literally keep you up at night, but what would you like? Man, I would just like some
uh,
closure. I just would love to know what really happened there.
yeah, I'd say OG would probably be it. You know, and I'm not trying to make anybody mad, but obviously I'd like to know, the truth on CJ's buck too, because I mean, that's one thing that something that happens in your generation, and let
Mhm.
alone something that happened back in the 1940, But I'd say probably those two, OG or CJ's buck. So
Uh-huh.
would probably be my pick, if you will.
Yeah. Well, you have two other set of sheds there on your table too. We haven't talked about. I want to hear about those.
Well, I'll go with the over the top. If you, it's I basically Amanda named this one. Over the top with Sylvester Stallone. With the whole arm wrestling thing. Well, that's where this G2 kind of comes from. I mean, it's just shy of 16 inches. So
Wow.
it kind of comes up so far, and then it bends over, and it's over top of his G3. And then he grew such a weak G3, and actually broke a little hanger off of it. So now he's a typical. And then he goes to a G4 that is tri-bladed. He's got three sides on this.
Wow.
I mean, the four, that's a record book four there. So, and then he starts a little nub that he broke off, and it's not scoreable. And then you see he's got a little bit of a loop on his main beam, and has
What a
almost a muley brow. Yeah.
yeah.
So that shed has went into the collection, and Gary Reisman has been after that shed for a while. But it scores high. It was in third place there at Iowa 2 years ago. Um, I think Troy Berg ended up coming in with a big tipple, and beat this one out. So uh, I'll show you a little story uh, about a week ago now. I heard about this shed 3 days. I heard about the shed, and then 3 days later, I went and I got this shed. But it's in the same area, general
Yeah,
vicinity,
wow.
within 5 miles of where this shed would have been, where this deer was. It would have been. This is 5 miles. So this is the Derek Daniels shed. I ended up getting that off of him, and I mean,
It's
it's got
yeah.
some real good characteristics that resemble each other. So it's obviously not the same buck, but definitely, I'd say genetically wise, it's probably the same line.
I would agree with that. Yeah, once again, everyone's got to watch the video version of this because those are very, very, very similar.
Yeah, that G2. I mean, if you line them up, I mean, it bends at the same point almost.
Hmm.
So, but that's one of the things that in the collecting part of stuff, like you got somebody that finds a good shed and they're not really into collecting. Don't let it go to waste. Make contact with them, and put them somewhere. Put their name on it, or whatever. But get it displayed. Let the public kind of see that what can be found out there.
Hmm.
But that's one I just acquired. I mean, that's been within a week. So
Wow.
sometimes you got to move quick in collecting, and then just like the shed I'm about to tell you about, sometimes it will teach you patience. So, but the I don't know if you've heard of the restitution buck here out of southern Ohio. It was poached. It was killed in 2009, and at that point in time, that year, it was the largest typical of the United States. So that year, when it got poached, it it grossed like 220s, and it was a net of like 197 plus. So in 2009, it was poached, um, and it was poached just here outside of Peebles. So 2 years prior to that, before that buck was poached, and a lot of the locals will tell you that that deer was kind of dumb. He would come out in the middle of the day, feeding wide open in the beans or a hayfield. So I think that's what helped the guy that poached it, you know, kind of get onto it. So a little story behind it. He poached that deer uh, before our season come in. It was still in velvet. He took it to Kentucky and tagged it in because their season comes in almost a month before ours. So he got away with it for a little bit. So whatever the circumstance was, I don't know if he got invited or he just brought his deer up here to the Ohio Deer and Turkey Expo that next year. Um, he actually got busted at the Ohio Deer and Turkey Expo. The wardens busted him right in front of everybody, right there at the show. Ian Obenshane and another gentleman there in Peebles, that had the deer on trail camera, had the pictures. They said, "Man, that's that deer. There's no doubt that's that deer." So basically, they took the pictures in, and they showed the wardens and everything, and the investigation started. And he fessed up to it, but he had prior convictions. I think he had like 10 prior convictions. So I mean,
Wow.
people like that don't stop. But so that's the restitution buck. He got hit with $23,000+ in restitution is what he got hit with that. So 2 years prior to that buck being poached, this shed was found by Dusty Halls out of Peebles, and this is the shed that was found 2 years before that deer was poached. And he
Wow.
got very much. He stayed typical. He didn't. He grew a little bit of non-typical, but as a clean typical, this one right here goes 85 inches.
Wow.
So, and that it's just a beautiful typical buck. I mean, you couldn't ask for a better one. But as far as Dusty finding it, I mean, there was multiple people in the community that had trail cam pictures and things like that, and even saw it in person, just driving by. But that right there kind of boosted. That's what really put my foot in the door in the collecting, I guess. It took me 2 years to acquire this shed. Uh, it was one of those things when we was digging water line through his yard the first time I seen it. And I walked in, and a couple of guys I worked with, uh, Dustin Crothers was with me, and I walked in. I looked, and I was like, I just looked at the shed. I was like, man, that looks familiar. So Dustin walked out, and I looked at Dusty. And I was like, Dusty. I was like, Dusty. He's like, yeah. He's like, that's. We're pretty sure that's the shed. So I said, well, how far was that shed found from where that buck was poached? He said, oh, he's like, it was in the same field. He said,
Whoa.
yardage wise, it wasn't very far. So I looked at him and I said, well, I'm going to give you so much money today. He said, I just don't want to sell it right now. I'm going to hang on to it. So I went back. I talk to him every now and then, and he's a good friend. He's a good guy, and knows the woods like the back of his hands. And I said, Dusty, I said, I've run into a little bit of money. I said, I'm willing to give you a little bit more, a little more peso, a little bit, dinero on what I offered you the first time. He said, well, how much? And I said, well, I'm willing to give you this. And he said, yeah. He said, I'll do that. So, that took me 2 years. So that was kind of a milestone in that part of it. But that deer is still on display in Xenia up there at their ODNR headquarters. So I actually got pictures with that buck, this shed right beside it, and the game wardens and everything. So that was I'd say that's probably one of my more favorite singles in the collection.
Yeah.
Just because like you said, the story behind it, I guess.
Hmm. Yeah. No, that's fascinating. Well, yeah, I really appreciate you sharing all this. I think it's really cool hearing the stories and hearing your perspective of someone that's ate up by it and turning over stones in order to find. I mean, that's so funny. You just running a water line, or
Yeah.
yeah, it's just
Well,
bizarre.
I'll do this, Jake. Uh, do you have sheds back there on that table?
Yeah, I do. I do have some. Yeah, nothing as cool
Uh,
as what you have.
well, I've noticed a 4-point back there on that table. So if you're willing to get rid of that, if you're willing to get rid of that shed, I'll send you one of my sheds, and I'll have my signature on it. So see,
Or
that's
sure.
how a collector works. He's
Yeah,
always looking for antler. So,
yeah, yeah.
but
I don't think I have anything over 70 inches back there. So, but, yeah, these are
hey,
all
it
ones.
don't matter if it's a spike or a 100-inch antler, man. They're all awesome. It don't matter what size they are. So
Yeah, no, and that's the fun thing about it, and I think that's what's so interesting is like there's so many different categories, like you mentioned the one of the biggest 4-point sides, or all these different things, and so it's just cool to see all these different deer, same species, but are so unique, and I think that's part of what makes whitetail hunting so awesome is that
yeah,
a lot of deer are really special and really unique, and it's you shoot a mallard, and a lot of mallards look identical, and it's not the same for
right.
whitetail deer.
Yep. Yeah, I'd have to agree with that, Jake. Definitely. I mean, it's you don't know what you're going to get, and that's part of the fun and the surprise, that you get with whitetail. And we can't pick it. I mean, we don't make it. So it's like, you always got that element of surprise with them. And drop tines. I don't know about you, but I'm a sucker for drop tines. Love them. If they're especially if they're a big drop tine, I love them. But I'm also into them. Big typicals too. But just like the Sam Willett buck, he had like over 72 inches just in non-typical.
Wow.
And I mean that's counting his drop tines and his flyers and his splits. So I mean that's you can't overlook that either. So, but it's one of them things where I love the surprise. You don't know what you're going to get from one year to the next. You might have a buck that you're hunting, consecutively, and say he may be a 4-year-old. He's just hitting that mature list, and he throws a flyer, and he never had a flyer the first 3 years. So all of a sudden the fourth or fifth year he throws a split brow, or maybe the fifth year he gets hit, and then he grows some big weird side and a perfect typical side. I call that the Jekyll and Hyde, and I got a Jekyll and Hyde buck here. It come out of the Phil Lawrence, and one side is perfect clean typical, and the other side split brow acorn tip, hole in the horn, blowhole, and it's got a flyer, and I mean it's weird, but that's the beautiful thing about it. They've all got their characteristics, and it's just a good surprise every year from one year to the next.
Yeah. No, you're exactly right. Well, where can if someone wants to get in contact with you and they have a 200-inch typical in their basement and they want to sell it to you, how do they get a hold of you?
They can get a hold of me. I'm on social media, Jonathon York. I'm on Facebook a lot. So by all means, and I'm not trying to push any other collector out or whatever, if you do have that beautiful 200-inch typical,
Call me first.
yeah, come this way, come this way. I'll cook you a steak on the grill. I'll pay you good money, and we'll get pictures, and I'll hold the baby and pat you on the back. I'll do whatever I got to do. So, but yeah, that's I'm on social media, so I mean, it's under Jonathon York. So if you ever want to reach out or just follow along, I mean, I greatly appreciate it. So
Yeah, well, if we get down your direction, we definitely have to do a whitetail cribs. And appreciate you doing this, carving out some time throughout your day. Really enjoyed it, and I encourage everyone to add you on Facebook and see all the different deer that you have.
well, I appreciate it. I'll cook you a steak personally, Jake, if you just come down here. That way you can see them all. I'll put some taters on. We'll cook a steak for you and everything.
I would be I would love that because it seems like just seeing it on the screen and looking at that collection, I can't imagine what some of those deer look like in person because they're humongous here on camera.
Well, you see what's behind me. The whole room's done like that, and
I
all
can
the mounts are. You can't see what's behind you, but all the mounts. I mean, I've got elk and moose and everything else. I mean, I love the four antler species, mule deer. Uh, but what you see behind me, there's even more out behind you. So, but there's a lot of racks when I got into the rack collecting that I just don't post. It's not because I don't want people to see it. It's just I think the rack collecting, sometimes I like to just surprise people with what is out there. So,
Mhm. Awesome. Well,
but
thank you so
yeah.
much, Jonathan.
Hey, Jake, I appreciate you guys, and you tell everybody we said hello there.